Vegas Circle podcast with your hosts, Paki and Chris. We are people who are passionate about business, success, and culture, and this is our platform to showcase the people in our city who make it happen. On today's podcast, we got a special episode. We're going to be sitting down with two visionaries who have reshaped the landscape of streetwear and luxury fashion. Welcoming guests to the circle, we have the owners of Feature Sneaker Boutique. We got Ajay, Luera, and Arjay Bouri. So welcome to the circle.
Welcome.
Let's dive right in, man. So Feature, you guys nearly been on the scene for about 14 years, from my understanding. Opened up in Chinatown. Now you've jumped into the Wynn Hotel. But let's just talk about kind of what you were asking us earlier. How did you guys connect and become partners?
First off, you called it Feature Sneaker Boutique.
Okay, did I say it wrong?
No, I'm just gonna let you. It's just Feature, right?
Just Feature, okay.
And we'll probably get into the history a little bit more. But when we first started, we were actually just a sneaker boutique.
Just a boutique. That's
right.
Okay.
And we learned really quick that wasn't going to be enough to really drive this business, and so we just became a fully functioning apparel, footwear, accessories brand.
Okay.
Right? But so it's not Feature Sneaker Boutique.
There we go. I got to correct that.
But people always say that. So.
Okay.
Ajay and I have been friends for over 20 years. We met in college. Okay. I was on the DJ scene, nightlife scene. Okay. He was a nightlife kid.
You said nightlife kid. There you go.
And then, bartending and stuff like that. And so we crossed paths a lot in college. We got the opportunity to work together in nightlife. Really solidified our friendship then, Events, just took us in different places. I was still living in Reno. That's where we went to college. And Ajay made his way down to Vegas. And, he'll probably elaborate a little bit more on this, but kind of dabbled in fashion up there, was interested in retail. And so with that kind of knowledge base that he had already started to accumulate up there, brought it down here, saw that there was this void down here that at that time, right? You're talking about 2010, where there's and you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like high end here and really basic streetwear here and not much, in between.
No meat in between.
Right,
I get it.
And so, he came back up to Reno, was traveling, commuting back and forth, coming to help me up there. And he said, man, there's a big opportunity down there. So we put our heads together and a little bit of money, and we did it in 2010, man. Which was, if you don't remember, that was a recession.
Oh yeah,
tough time, housing crisis, but we put our chips on the table, man. We rolled the dice.
That's powerful. So were you kind of the visionary? Was this kind of your brainchild, in the beginning, or?
Yeah, I would say Feature's probably like my little baby that's still growing.
Yeah.
Has it always been something you wanted to do? Have you always been interested in doing fashion? Same for you? Is it something you just kicked off right away?
How you did the fashion in Reno, how you brought it down to here, because it's a great story.
When I was a kid, I was that kid that was selling Jolly Ranchers out of his backpack. So I think I always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. From Jolly Ranchers, I went to other things that probably weren't so good to be selling.
When I
was younger, but essentially when I was in Reno, I was working in nightlife, and there was a women's boutique, and this is way back in the day when kind of what we do now doesn't exist. So this is back when True Religion and Rock and Republic and Ed Hardy and kind of the breakout into $200 men's jeans was happening, kind of following in the footsteps of female fashion. Mm-hmm. And, I had a friend that was working at a boutique in Reno, and they had a back room that they were using for sale items. And we were just talking, and I ended up subleasing kind of the back space and doing men's apparel. They kind of operated it. I did the buying and kind of brand acquisition. When that store ended up closing down, I basically kept all my wholesale accounts. I got a UPS box, which, if you guys know, it kind of looks like a business address.
Mm-hmm.
And just told a lot of these vendors that I kind of, moved to a new location, and was basically buying product at wholesale and just took it to like a personal shopping level. So, basically what I was doing is, putting together bags of gear, dope clothes in someone's size. I would give it to them. They'd take it home, try on what they wanted. And my shtick was I got to give them 20% off retail, right? For, the newest deliveries of product.
Yeah.
Because I had no overhead, right? And so I was doing that, moved to Vegas, was working in nightlife. At the time, at some point, a lot of people, not everyone, kind of hit a plateau with nightlife, right? Either you really want to, spend 5 nights a week drinking and partying, or, you kind of grow up a bit and, still do that occasionally, but, for the most part, you get kind of burnt out.
Quick,
late nights, early mornings at the office, which was definitely a shock for me. You know, when we worked in nightlife in Reno, it was a little bit more relaxed. Here it's, you know, a multi-billion-dollar industry, you know, and it operates as one. You know, you're in the office, your outings, you're open 4 nights a week. I mean, it's a lot of work. And so I kind of continued doing some of the personal shopping stuff down here, and then really just got kind of burnt out. And at the time, it was really just Undefeated. Was the only store in town, and you know, we love shoes. We would come to Vegas and actually go to Undefeated. So we would go stay at the Hard Rock and go to rehab and do that whole thing back in the early 2000s. And you know, one of the places we would always stop was Undefeated to buy cool sneakers. And so, you know, in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. You know, in fashion, generally the way it used to work in contemporary is if you're, you know, 2 miles away from the next closest account, they just green light you as long as your store looks decent. So, you know, had the idea, was going up to Reno, kind of pitched him and a couple other buddies, and, you know, we scrounged up some cash and kind of, you know, went down the path of IKEA shelves on the wall and mirrors stuck to the wall. And, you know, in our heads, it was this awesome, you know, store. But in hindsight, compared to what we do now, it was definitely, you know, nowhere close to what I would call a...
It was very entry level.
Very
entry level,
yeah. And then obviously, you know, two crazy things kind of happened. One, we came to the realization that, you know, getting a Nike or a Vans or New Balance account, they generally make you wait a couple years because of the fast turn in that industry. And so a lot of the reps don't want to get accounts open, understanding that 95% of them shut down. And so they really try to wait till after that lull of understanding that you can actually survive before they'll even consider opening you. So that was one challenge that we came across, was just the assumption that, oh, you know, I'm going to get a Nike account, no problem. You know, it took us 8 years to get a Nike account, right?
Oh, that's wild. I don't know that.
And
you said 8 years.
Yeah. We operated without Nike or Jordan for the first 8 years.
Wow.
And then the second big thing was, you know, at the time it was just us in Undefeated. And then lo and behold, like a month before we opened, you know, we heard Vice was opening a store at the Cosmo, and he was opening with Nike because he had relationships with them. You know, and as early entrepreneurs in my head, I was like, fuck, we're dead in the water. You know, like this is it. Business, you know, like this is going to be rough. And, you know, we stuck it out and kind of grinded it out to where we are today.
Now, what made you choose Chinatown for the location?
Cheap
and proximity, right? So
because you're still close to the Strip. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the intent was like, okay, well, obviously we couldn't open in a casino. How do we capture some of the tourists that are coming into town, which makes Vegas Vegas? Yeah. And it's, you know, you can't do that in Summerlin, and you can't do that necessarily in Henderson. No one's going to hop in a cab and take a 25-minute drive to go to this unknown sneaker shop. So the idea was to, you know, be central, right? Chinatown's pretty central, so I think anywhere in Vegas you can kind of get there within 20 minutes. And then the second thing was being close to the Strip. And then the third thing was it was literally dirt cheap.
I don't blame you.
And the fourth thing was, at the time, there was a store called New, which was, you know, Vegas's only kind of streetwear store. And it was owned by a couple of DJs, Cricket and Neva, and they were our neighbors for about the first 3 months, and then they moved up the street.
Neva just passed
he did,
You're right. Yeah. Shout out to Neva. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so, you know, we thought that we'd be able to draft off of what they'd kind of already built in Chinatown. They were going to do the apparel, and our intent was to do sneakers and, you know, maybe some accessories or a little bit of apparel that would just accessorize your sneakers. And then literally probably 3 or 4 months after we opened, they're like, oh, yeah, we're moving up the street. We need more space. So I was like, oh, well, that plan didn't work.
What makes something like a boutique? So, you know, you have these big, large apparel stores. Like, what is, like, the threshold between... what's the difference between the two? From just a standard retail store and a boutique store?
I think it's curation, right?
Yeah, okay.
And so I think that what's happened now in the retail landscape is Neiman, Saks, Nordstrom's, Barney's, when it was around... they're actually chasing the brands that they wouldn't have touched 10 years ago because they weren't big enough or they didn't make sense for them. And now if you think about what's kind of happened in fashion, you know, there's internet brands that go crazy, you know, and they're selling $300 t-shirts, but they have X, Y, and Z person wearing it, and all of a sudden they explode, and it's created this new category. You know, if you think about it, back in the day, you know, we saw some luxury brands, Givenchy, Amiri. You know, back in the day, you couldn't get a Givenchy account. There's 3-4 boutiques in the country that sold those caliber of brands, right? But I think now, you know, you walk around and you see people in Nikes with Prada, right? And back in the day, the pure luxury customer was a pure luxury customer, and The guy that was buying streetwear was buying streetwear, and the guy that was buying contemporary was buying contemporary. Now it's all just kind of intertwined. You know, like I wear some luxury goods, but I also wear plain feature T-shirts, and you know, I wear cool sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back in the day, you didn't see people kind of mixing those things.
And how do you kind of keep that like you know, that boutique feel as you continue to grow and get larger, and as you start building an online presence, you start, you know, seeing this explosion of, you know, fashion and people wearing different things. Like, how do you still have that curation, or is it less like that? More, I can provide a lot of quantity for a larger portion of people that want that appeal to.
So to me, it's a combination of two things, right? One, you have to be passionate about what you do, and you know, myself, EJ, like there's people. In addition to that, we have, you know, we call them kids, right? But they're not kids. They're our kids.
They are kids.
But, you know, we have people on our team that are obviously, and look, I'm older, you know, they may have a better pulse on some of the more up and coming stuff, and we listen. And
I respect that, because you got to know. You got to be able to know.
That's just the reality as you get older. Like, I like what I like. And then the second thing is, you know, I'm traveling the world. I'm going to Paris and Tokyo, to different markets, and, you know, seeing what other stores are doing and acquiring brands that way. And the internet's a powerful thing, so you stay on top of that. So I think that's the curation piece. Mm-hmm. As far as what keeps a boutique, I think is, you know, part of it boils down to infrastructure, right? Some of the things that we did really early on, because we had to build a strong backbone, because we didn't have Nike and Jordan dollars coming in, which for all intents and purposes is everyone's biggest account. If you think about the sneaker industry, Nike and Jordan drive it. Adi sometimes is definitely in the top three. There might be some shifts here and there, but Nike and Jordan are pretty much the GOATs, right? And so because we didn't have those brands, we had to, you know, fight tooth and nail to make the other brands that we had work. And then also, you know, we had to build a lot of infrastructure in order to make sure that we were sound to push forward. And where I'm going with that is, as we opened multiple doors, one of the first things we did is create a district manager position, probably 2 stores before we actually needed it. And we did that because, you know, for me, when you walk into a store, you know, I like to call it home base, which is Vegas for us. Well, we can control that. Mm-hmm. Like, we're there all the time. Our team's there. Our headquarters there.
You can keep the pulse and really know what's going on.
But what happens is if you start opening stores out of state, how do you keep that experience the same, right? So I want somebody that walks in feature in Chinatown to feel the same way at the Wynn, the same way at Scottsdale, the same way in Calabasas, and soon the same way in La Jolla. And one of the ways you do that is by creating some infrastructure and people that are actually traveling to those stores, making sure that the smell is the same in the stores, the checkout process is the same, you know, all those things are consistent, and then building SOPs around those things to make sure that we're ensuring that you know, happens. And then secondary to that is, you know, we do quarterly audits. Our district manager does. He goes in to make sure that they're meeting all those expectations, our GMs.
Got it. Makes sense.
So you said you actually did that about 2 stores in advance. So did that start at the Chinatown store?
So once we had the Wynn store, we
okay.
created that position. We wanted somebody that would kind of oversee both of those stores. And then super talented guy named Kevin. He's been with us since he was actually an intern. He actually worked for free.
It was the longest intern we ever had, actually.
But again,
poor Kevin.
Yeah.
But when you talk about passion, the guy is so passionate about, you know, this industry and fashion and sneakers that, you know, I mean, obviously great intern that turned into, you know, a pretty high position in our company and continues to grow. So we did that at store 2. You know, and now obviously we're at store 4, about to open store 5. And he kind of oversees that piece.
Well, it's interesting. Like you touched a little bit about like online shopping, right? Like everybody and their mom's trying to sell online or you know, do that whole process. What would make you choose like a Wynn, right, to open up a second, you know, store, specifically with the real estate being as high? I don't even know what you guys pay for real estate. You know, the rent.
It's exactly what you think it is.
I bet it is, 'cause I've heard some stories. I don't know what number it is, but like, what would make you choose, you know, a Wynn to open up, you know, this high end of
Yeah, so I think a couple reasons. You know, where we wanted to go from a directional standpoint was really pushing the envelope and getting into that luxury world, getting into the emerging designer world. And the challenges that we were running into is if, you know, you Google Map or shit in Chinatown, you're like, I'm not going to sell these guys $700 T-shirts. This may not make sense. And so we're hitting some roadblocks, you know, when we were trying to really push forward. And it wasn't necessarily everything else was done right. The website was good, Instagram, in-house photography, like everything was done well, but we had this hurdle. Sometimes it takes one or two brands to really break that. And so when the Wynn opportunity came up, I think there was really kind of two things. One, when your neighbor's a 6,000 square foot Hermes, people tend to all of a sudden listen and be like, oh, okay, these VPs and these higher ups at these higher end brands, they're probably staying at the Wynn, maybe Bellagio, but everyone knows the Wynn is synonymous with pure luxury, right? If 100%. You look at the retail footprint, they have every pure luxury brand there is, and if they don't have it, they're getting it, right? That's in process. And so that was kind of one piece of it. And then the second piece was, I think there's just a level of marketing and branding that came out of being at the Wynn. And so the intent for us was to never actually, we were okay if that store never turned a profit. Now, wanted it to break even.
At minimum, minimum break even.
We weren't in the world of like, hey, we got deep pockets and we're going to do this for marketing. But the intent was like, can we break even in this store and then reap the tertiary benefits of, brand adjacency, the marketing, the branding, the coexistence with such a great brand, being the Wynn. So
that makes sense.
That was kind of the intent.
I see it because when you corrected me in the beginning, right, saying this boutique feature is a brand and it's a well-known brand, and I could see that business play of opening it at the Wynn helps you to piggyback on a big market like Calabasas and obviously Scottsdale. These are all premium markets, but is that kind of the goal to open up, like you mentioned now, La Jolla? Are you trying to open in all the biggest kind of high-end markets? Is that kind of the...
Well, so one of the things that the Wynn did for us, right, is it put us on this like global stage. You're getting international players in there, you're getting wealth through there. And once we proved successful there, actually, I don't even think we had to prove successful. It was just the noise that we made there. They have that real estate convention in town.
ICSC.
Yeah. And man, we had everybody was knocking on our door because they want this concept, right? The concept that Ajay has built, it's in demand everywhere. And so that's when we really first noticed, like, okay, we're doing something right, number one. But number two, this Wynn partnership really did put us on that stage.
That's awesome.
I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or just elaborate on this, but, finding these little pockets, right, of people who are looking for what we're providing, but not saturated or sometimes not even any distribution in those places, like a Calabasas, like a La Jolla, right? I mean, New York, LA, Miami, like that's obvious.
Yeah.
Right?
Go to Soho, whatever it is. I follow you.
Yeah, I think the other way to look at it too is, one thing that I think that we're pretty adamant about is we want every feature to be at least 95% of feature, right? And when I say 95%, what happens is you always run into brand conflict. And so, there's some Japanese brands that have been working with the same 2 LA accounts for 25 years, and they've just shut down all of California. It's just they work with those 2 guys. They're happy, very relationship driven. And so when I say 95%, we always understand that we're not going to get every brand that we sell at every location. But we do want it to be 95%, similar. And what that means and where I'm going with that is when you sell emerging designer like Tom Brown and Sakai, and then you sell some luxury like Givenchy and Amiri, the challenge you run into is not every market can support those price points or has a customer that's looking for that product.
Got you.
And so if you think about Calabasas, Calabasas, right?
Correct, yeah.
I think
New Beverly Hills, I swear.
It's synonymous with wealth, right? Kardashian country, whatever you want to call it. When you think about, Scottsdale, extremely affluent market, 8 million people in the Phoenix metro area. There's, a couple other sneaker shops. There's one apparel account, but there's no one that kind of has it all under one roof like us. And if you think about La Jolla, it is the most affluent market in San Diego County. Again, you have a lot of people that live in La Jolla that drive into LA. And right now, a lot of them drive into LA to shop. And so really, our expectation isn't that people don't go to Melrose and they don't go to La Brea. But our expectation is like, not everyone wants to drive an hour every time they want to shop. So if you got a cool store in your backyard in Calabasas, you're going to pop in. You might shop there 3 out of 5 times, and during Christmas make the big trip to Rodeo and do your thing. But the hope is, and the intent is that we're kind of at a choke point where people can still come in and do most of their shopping with us, and we can service them. and then also still, go do their big shopping as needed. And so that's where the market selection comes in.
Kind of backtrack a little bit. So building that partnership with the Wynn, like how does that come to fruition? Because it's one thing to want to go there, but also for them to want you.
Not easy.
It's the craziest story, actually. We had a lot of friends that were pretty high up in Wynn nightlife, and when we heard that they were expanding the retail and doing the Wynn Plaza Shops, we reached out to a bunch of those guys. And at the Wynn, I think if you're at an executive level, everyone's tapped in with what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's a very cohesive team, and they're all working towards one goal, which is providing the best luxury experience in the city. And that works with nightlife and restaurants and gaming and every aspect. And so we kept asking our friends, and they're like, look, as Vegas generally does, they only want big outside brands, right?
I think
they
some of our friends is Natalia and Jay Sean and these guys.
Yeah, totally. Ron Nicoli and Jerry Garcia. And so what happens is the conversations we were having was like they only want guys from outside, so they're gonna go for the best New York sneaker concept or Boston, right? There's 10 or 12 guys in our space that are really kind of bigger at this point. And so we kind of written it off. And at the time, Scottsdale has a pretty big mall, and they were remodeling and doing a luxury wing, and so they invited us out, flew us out to wine us and dine us with a couple other people that they were trying to get to sign leases. So we go on this trip, and we're having some drinks, and we meet a gentleman named Charlie, who at the time was the head of retail for a company called Richemont. And Richemont owns, I think they're Cartier. It's one of the luxury houses, Bulgari, whatever, right? And so we're just kind of bullshitting with this guy Charlie. We kind of clicked, and there's a bunch of other people in the group, but the three of us started talking. And he was just asked, he's like, well, why don't you guys go to the casino? I'm like, dude, we've been pounding the pavement trying to figure out this Wynn situation. And he's like, oh, my old boss and mentor is running up that whole project. He's doing all the leasing. He's like, let me put you in contact with him. And you hear that stuff all the time, and a lot of times it doesn't happen. So we get back, follow up, and he's like literally puts me on text with the same guy who actually is our broker, and him and Charlie actually started a business together, and they still do actually all of our deals since the Wynn. They've done every deal that we've done. So he puts us in contact with him, and he's like, oh, I'll be there in 3 days. I'm out there every weekend right now, basically meeting with retailers or whatever. So I pick him up at the Wynn, take him to Chinatown. I give him the tour, and he's like, dude, honestly, this is the concept that they're looking for. This is the concept that they want. But the general intent has been to bring outside brands in that'll drive traffic and energy. But he's like, as far as I'm concerned, he's like, I'm actually pissed because this was right under my nose, and we never really
knew it was there.
Knew it was there, right? Which goes to show you in business that you can think you're the coolest guy in town, or you think that you have brand presence in town.
People don't know.
You sometimes, dude. I don't think we talk about it all the time. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg, even locally. There's still people that come in like, I never even heard of this place. This is amazing. Yeah. So anyway, we met with him, and he took it to the higher ups, and a couple months later, they were like, basically we got the approval, and then the next step was really figuring out how we were going to get the $1.3 million to build that, because it's all union. And I remember having that conversation with EJ and our other partners, and I was like,
building a Kia. What'd you say? A Kia?
I was like, look, they're like, well, we need the money. I was like, we're going to figure it out. Like, this is just the opportunity of opportunities. We have to figure it out, whether we, rob, steal, and cheat, dude. We're going to get this done. We'll pay everyone back or whatever. And so that's kind of, it's kind of the story. It was just, kind of dumb luck that we got.
That's an interesting story. What's the odds of that?
How long have you guys been in that partnership at Wynn? When did you guys open it?
2018.
2018. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then the pandemic hits, and then,
So the pandemic hit actually 3 months after we opened our Calabasas store.
Oh, wow.
So we literally opened a store in November, and then I think in March, everything shut down.
Yep.
And I don't know if you guys recall, Vegas was pining to get open and got open as soon as they can. California was the polar opposite, just with that lockdowns in LA County. And, so we reopened for a month and shut down for 4 months, and reopened for 2 months, then shut down again. It was a pretty wild ride, and you're trying to keep staff. And it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But with the shift though during the pandemic, a lot more things happen online. Obviously, I think that with you being a retail store, which is easily translatable online in a lot of circumstances, like do you see a higher percentage of your sales being in store versus online, or is it still pushing one or the other?
But it's really by design, and so we launched online in
2014.
2014.
Okay, so you guys are a little later.
Yeah,
later.
Which is a little bit late.
Okay.
Well, so we opened in 2010. I think we knew that we were going to be online at some point, right? But in 2014 is when we got serious about it.
Okay.
And when
really
you
having like the inventory and the
Well, because you got
distribution
to, I mean, if you think about online, you go to these smaller boutiques and they're, using images from every different brand and it just doesn't look good. And so for us, it was like, you got to hire a photographer. You got to figure out how to shoot on white backdrop. You got to figure out all these different things. It takes money and it takes time. And, I think 2014 is when we finally did it.
Okay.
And then, subsequently to that, we decided internally that at the end of the day, brick and mortar is very important to us, but let's just call it what it is. We all shop online more than brick and mortar, especially if you get comfortable with the brand. If you know your size 9 Nike, it's consistent. Yeah. Like who really wants to drive to a store or deal with that, especially if you're busy and, you have jobs and families. Yeah. And so we made the decision to really push online a couple years later. And so we've built a pretty significant in-house digital marketing team. Okay. There's about 10 or 12 people that just focus on digital for us. Everything from SEO to paid ads. We do everything in-house. So we don't outsource anything other than some web development. Mm-hmm. And so, when the pandemic hit, we were actually built a lot differently than a lot of the boutiques that they didn't have an online presence or they had online stores, but really if you think about online versus brick and mortar, online is a business and it's its own business and you have to treat it like a business. So a lot of my friends in this industry, they're hyper-focused on brick and mortar and online's here and they make some money and they sell some product, but they don't treat it as a separate BDU where they're like, I got to staff it. I got to hire somebody that does content and somebody that's going to be in charge of my email campaigns. And so we did that pretty early on, and during the pandemic, it really paid off because we had, a strong digital presence by that point. And then on top of that, we had a digital team that was still, working actively during those times. Yeah. So I think everyone exploded from an online perspective during the pandemic. But I think that we saw, probably significantly more than what most boutiques in our space did.
I was going to ask, do you treat it independently when it comes to like inventory management, or do you get the inventory from your boutique stores and then post that online?
We don't. So we're omni-channel. So essentially we do a buy and that gets divvied out to the stores. We have a pretty big warehouse here and, that's obviously where orders get picked first. And then from there, there's a pecking order for the stores.
Got it.
And so there's definitely, some boutiques and businesses that treat everything differently, and make sure that inventory. I've always been a firm believer that, sales is sale.
You gotta sell it. Yeah.
So,
share inventory across it.
And so, that's always made the most sense for us.
Yeah. I was curious about these bots with the shoe releases and all that. People buying everything in them and you can't get the inventory. Like, how do you guys compete with that? Even though that I feel like you guys are a bigger brand, right? But how do you compete with the bots and the people that try to?
Like, how do we prevent the bots?
How do you prevent it
from attacking?
Correct.
To be totally honest, it's pretty tough. A lot of sneaker stores in our space have switched to raffle systems. Mm-hmm. You can control it better through a raffle system because the customer's not checking out. You end up checking out for them.
Got it.
And it's randomized. The problem with that is that those same bots can enter your raffle 3 million times.
That's true,
so
it's very difficult. Yeah.
There's other things like you can tell if a product goes up and within 2.4 seconds, every unit's eaten up, and the email address, the name is all the same, other than one letter at the end. You can kind of tell, and we'll actively go in and sweep those orders and cancel them.
Okay, that's okay, good stuff. Okay,
everyone does the best they can, but to be totally honest, every time Shopify or whatever comes out with some sort of bot protection, they beat it. It's just like anything. It's just like chip credit cards. They're gonna find a way to beat that too. Just as smart as the guys trying to stop them, there's guys just as smart trying to figure out how to hack the system, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Who's actually designing? Because I love what you guys are wearing right now. I mean, you got the feature shirt, you got the the branding with the Golden Knights. Who's actually designing and coming out with the feature brand and all the new apparel that you guys are coming out with?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of two prongs. So we've got some in-house graphic designers.
Okay.
That work on a lot of our graphics programs, headwear, And then we've got like a 3-person team that works on, the fashion industry, what you call more cut and sew pieces. So button-up sweaters, things a lot of that nature. So we've got a decent sized team that kind of focuses on those 2 product prongs.
And how do you see like the comparison? Like, do you see your personal branding like getting to, elevating as you continue to get more, involved in the spaces?
We were just talking about that today because we've gotten to that point now. We're producing so much product. I mean, this doesn't sound self-serving, but
no, I get it. Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that we're producing is so good, and it can sit next to anything else. Yeah. And I think that people are starting to buy in, right, and understand that, okay, it's not just graphic tees. Like, I can complete a whole outfit. I can make an entire wardrobe out of some pieces that features.
I was seeing your suits, man. Those jumpsuits, man.
Oh, the tracksuit.
Yeah, man. I like that. Yeah,
that's actually what we were talking about.
I was looking at that last night.
I think we were a little early on the tracksuit, right?
Those suits are sick, man. I'm not just saying that because you guys are sitting there. They look really good. Yeah.
I think what happens is, most stores, the easiest thing to produce is graphic T-shirts, headwear. You can buy blanks, you get a screen printer, you put your logo on it, and it's tertiary extra business. And the reality, especially in Vegas or the markets we're in, I think people want to go to a store and get a piece of something and says that they went there, right? Like I went to that store, especially when you talk about what we do. There's tons of states that don't have any store like ours, right? So you have kids that are actively shopping on different websites or these boutiques that are located in more major markets. And so when they come to one of these markets, it's important for them to go and be a part of it, right? The challenge with that is when you're known for just making $50 graphic T-shirts, when you put out a $195 pair of cargo pants, people are like,
what are they doing?
Is this really what? Yeah. And so I think that takes time as well. And then again, it takes, a team, you have to, it's heavy investment. I always joke with Kim, who does a lot of our private label, and it's not easy to make a T-shirt. And it sounds so crazy to say, but when you talk about fabric torquing and shrinkage and all these things, right, that you don't think about when you just go buy a T-shirt. But when you make a T-shirt, you have to test for all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so all those things become challenging. And you have to have a quote-unquote expert on your team that really knows what they're doing. Because you'll go to factories and be like, I'll just make this. And they're like, okay, we'll make that. Sure. But the stitching is a little bit different, causes issues. It shrinks 3 sizes when you dry it, because they're not shrink testing it. They don't care. They're just trying to make it to spec. And so, it surprisingly takes a lot of effort to build products.
I'm glad you're doing that because I feel like a lot of the shirts I get do not do that, and they always shrink up on me, turn to belly shirts, and I'm good on that.
Crop tops.
Yeah, little crop tops.
I mean, that's the most impressive about your guys' story is the fact that the clothing industry is one of the hardest industries to stay in, and the food industry. You know what I mean? It's very
bars
hard.
And nightlife, right?
Thank you. I'm sorry. Say again.
Said bars and nightlife, right?
100%.
In retail, they say they're number 1 and 2 for propensity to fail.
Yeah. So it's amazing. Where do you want to take the feature brand to? What's that kind of ultimate vision?
I mean, there's people in the space I think that we look up to.
Sure.
Probably friendly competition, or
it's good to have competition,
or even unfriendly competition that we'd like to surpass.
Sure.
But I think that the goal is that feature is a household name, top of mind brand that can sit next to anywhere that's in our space.
Okay.
I think a simplistic way to put it is we want to be one of the best in our space. And so, when I wake up, I think that's what drives me. There's a couple other guys in our space that make really good private label, and so we emulate to make product as good as them and create a true feature brand that's not just graphic T-shirts that can sit on its own. And we want to have the best curation of brands. We want to, when you look at our website and look at our Instagram, we want to be one of the best in our space to execute those things. And so I think that's really what, keeps the heart pumping.
Sure. From a business perspective, which one has better profit margins? Is it manufacturing your own, or these $800?
Always manufacturing your own.
Always your own, man.
Don't get it twisted. You sell one $800 T-shirt, you got to sell 16 of ours to meet that revenue demand. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit different. But I think that what's cool about building your own brand too is there's so many benefits, right? Yes, there's generally better margins. 2, there's obviously branding that's just walking around. And then 3, it's like awesome to see people actually buy
Rocking your stuff, man.
stuff that you're making, right? Which means that they've taken some of their hard-earned dollars and they're willing to invest it with your brand and not the brand that has maybe been around for 20 years that people are going to recognize and be like, oh man, that's Stussy, oh that's a Givenchy tee, or that's Gallery Department. You know, I think that those are some of the benefits for sure.
I think that's never lost on me, right? Like when the first T-shirts we made were just simple branded feature tee because we weren't selling apparel at that time.
Got it.
And I remember people would like buy them, and I felt guilty charging them, right? Because like a feature tee, like you feel like you're doing me a favor, right? And I still geek out, man. We go to a concert or on the strip, and I see, I just got goosebumps saying that because it's like it just really.
That's the best feeling in the world.
It is, and it's never lost on me when I see someone walk by wearing a feature piece. Like it's humbling. It makes you feel good, you know.
Sure, yeah. How do you guys run your business now? Because now it's exploded. Are you guys still like the decision makers, or you kind of have like you got to trust and be like, okay, you make that decision over there, and I just trust you. Like, how do you guys work that out? Because it's hard,
It's really hard, and now you know I think company wide we're somewhere in the 150 range of employees.
A lot of you're a firefighter every day, man.
You actually hit it right on the head, man.
Firefighter every day,
all day, every day, just putting out fires. AJ has taken on the CEO role.
Okay.
You know, he's obviously responsible for driving the brand, driving the growth.
Okay.
Big decision in Visionary. You know, I'm the operations. I'm the COO.
Okay.
So I know the operations, the stuff that's not sexy at all. But it is the infrastructure and the bones, and that's kind of how we divide and conquer. We brought on the C-suite marketing guy, CMO, who comes from a background dealing in big dollar companies.
To really scale this out.
And so little by little, you know, we'll keep adding those pieces, but I'd say we're both very involved in the day-to-day of the business. I mean, all day, every day, and night, and holidays.
It don't stop.
We don't. Yeah.
And I mean, we still invest everything back in, right? So if we're going to go hire a CMO or a VP of marketing, right? We don't have equity behind us where you're like, oh, okay, well, I got 20 mil from these guys and I can just go do this. And in some regards, I think there's 2 ways to look at that. You know, the one way is, well, if you have a bunch of money behind you, you can accelerate your business extremely fast, see more growth potential faster. The flip side of that for me is always that, you know, when it's your money, you're a lot more cautious. You're a lot more calculated in the way that you move, the decisions you make. And it's almost like the slow and steady wins the race. You know, I would say that I'm a pretty big proponent for that, or we are. It just, you know, you're more calculated in your decision making and you make the right steps. And, you know, we can open 1 store, maybe 2 a year, but that's okay. If we had to open 4 or 5 in a year, opening 1 makes me pull our hair out. Imagine 5, right? Like it'd just be crazy. And then to your point, when you talk about how quickly a boutique can lose its DNA, it's by that rapid acceleration and growth because all of a sudden your district manager's 4 stores and now you're 10. Well, he doesn't have the bandwidth to constantly be pinging these and making sure everything's okay. He's putting out fires now. This AGM quit. This GM's out the door. Right? And so now your whole concept of making sure you have a cohesive brand experience is out the door. Whereas, you know, if we do one a year, we can keep that.
Growth is kind of counterintuitive to the business model because you have to have the unique feeling for a boutique, and it's hard to do that when you're scaling so rapidly. It just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Well, someone that values like mentorship, who was, you know, kind of some of your mentors to kind of help you guys coach you through this process? Because 14 years is a hell of a run. But who's kind of in your ear to kind of keep your head straight and kind of coach you and guide you?
It's interesting because you know, I didn't come from retail, right? I came from nightlife, but I was always an entrepreneur, and so I would say like my mentorship came from family who have been successful in business, especially my dad. Not in his own business, but in like general business relations and things like that. I have a marketing degree. I read a lot. That's kind of where I get my knowledge from. But more than anything is you just learn from the mistakes, man, because we made so many mistakes.
Yeah. Still make mistakes.
And we still make mistakes. And so we've learned a lot from there. Being in like nightlife, I had mentors through those. And I think a lot of those qualities you learn or those lessons you learn, even though they're not related to retail, it's just about running a business or managing relationships and things like that. Because that's really what's the most important.
Relationship, everything.
You know?
How about yourself? Yeah.
For me, family, I think that we've done a good job at surrounding ourselves with our team, who I think that, you know, are pretty inspiring on a daily basis. And luckily, we've got some people that are smarter than us in what they do for us, right? And I think that that's really the intent. You always, you know, hear these things where your CMO should be better at marketing than you, and your CEO should be better at operations than you, and your district manager should be better at operating a store than you. And I think that in a lot of aspects of our business, we've been able to do that. And so, you know, we can count on our team. And then for me, I guess something that, you know, EJ probably doesn't interact with as much is I've got a lot of peers in the industry that some of them have been doing it longer. Some of them have different core competencies. And I think that there's a lot of, you know, knowledge transfer. Like we excel in structure and digital. You know, I've got some friends that excel in brick and mortar and other things. And so we were able to, you know, consult each other, but not charge each other.
Yeah.
You know?
It's good to have the relationship. You want to pick people's brain, man, for sure. Yeah, I get it. I get it. So just for business advice too, I mean, with us being, you know, the foundation of being a business, you know, podcast, what would you share with somebody that maybe is thinking right now and, you know, in April that, hey, they want to get in business for themselves? What would be one nugget that you would share for them?
That's tough.
Yeah.
It's
because business is not fun. You know what I mean? A lot of the times.
You know, when you talk about being an entrepreneur, I mean, it's like a cliche, right? They're like, oh, you'll never work so hard to work more than 40 hours a week. Or I don't know what the exact saying is, right? But you're not going to have a day off. You're not going to have an hour off. Like, you're always thinking, you know. I don't even know where I was going with that. But, I was going to reference that you said, like, you don't think that you could open a feature today, like the way we started in 2010. You don't think it would be. You
don't think you could replicate?
You don't think you could replicate it in this day and age?
Some context. I mean, we started feature with 75,000, and that was for inventory, build out, everything.
That was a good capital, though. I worked a little bit.
Not for inventory and retail.
I think
just to start.
I think to build a feature with brands inventory now, you'd probably be $1 to $2 million range to be safe with 6 months of operating income. To put it in perspective, you know, I work 6 days a week. Literally, our business partner's wife, who still works for us, she's actually just transitioned to an EA role, but she took Sundays for me so I had a day off, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was getting up at 3 a.m. trying to reach out to European brands, you know, using my mom's calling card because she would call India, like she gave me the number, you know.
Oh, how funny.
Like that's just, you know, the way that we grinded it out. It's tough because I think there's so many pieces of advice you can give somebody. I think the biggest thing for me is you really truly have to understand the amount of work that you're going to put in.
That's what
I think that we see people all the time that you look at people that own 20 Subways and you're like, oh shit, dude, that's not hard, right? He bought a Subway, but he's still operating that Subway and he's still putting out fires because he's got 20 Subways and whatever, right? And so I think that the biggest thing for me is just you have to be prepared for the work. And I don't think many people are. And I think that's what really separates entrepreneurship from somebody that can plug into a company. And there's nothing wrong with plugging into a company that's successful and building your career that way. Like you can be, you know, VP, you can be a CEO of a company that you don't own and, you know, be balling out. It's just a different path. Yeah. And sometimes for some people, it's easier to plug in and really excel and say, okay, well, these are my work parameters, but I'm going to just kick ass and take names here. Versus somebody on the entrepreneur side where it's like that process isn't built. You're building them as you go and you're figuring things out and you're making mistakes and realizing it, you know. I remember the first time we had a shoe project that failed. We were in New York. We did a pop-up and the shoe didn't sell the way that I expected and it was crippling. I was literally couldn't get out of bed and my girl literally was like, dude, your whole team's here. You know, basically like, get your ass up. You don't have the luxury of sulking in bed because you're depressed about a sneaker release. You got people depending on you that flew out here to do this thing with you. You basically got to sack up, and those are some of the lessons that when you think you should learn. Now we make mistakes, and you're just like, shit, I made a mistake. You keep it pushing, you know. I think one of the best pieces of advice my brother ever gave me was, there's no company in the world that is an A at every aspect of their business. If you look at Apple, it's marketing and maybe innovation, right? But if you compare an iPhone to a Samsung, the Samsung shits on it. And I hate to say that because I'm an Apple guy. Same. And I'll tell my friends that have Samsungs, like, your shit sucks. But deep down, like...
He came to Apple, though.
But deep
I
down...
was the same way when I came to Apple.
But listen, it's more powerful machine. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that they're an A in certain things and certain things they're not, right? Like, Tesla is an A for innovation, but... shit falls off all the time, and like it's not necessarily made the best. But when you think about what they built, they transformed the electric car industry, right?
Yeah,
it's innovation. They're an A+ at that. But when you talk about quality of vehicle, they might be in that B- C+ range. Whereas there's other cars like Volvo that are A+ at quality of vehicle. But once you understand that, you pick the areas that you want to be super proficient and be an A+ at, and you can still excel and scale your business significantly, but nobody does everything perfect. It's
I love your transparency.
Yeah, that's great.
How you guys are just so real with it is great, because I think it's beneficial for a lot of people that think that they could just, like you just said, open up a shoe store like it's nothing, and they don't realize, like you just said, that you might need over $1 million, just for capital to even start, to even open up the doors. So I appreciate y'all's honesty.
I would tell you, anyone who's listening to this that might want to open any kind of business, right?
Don't say don't do it.
Yeah. Don't compete with Peachy. Yeah.
No. It's like we didn't know what we didn't know when we started the business, right? And so a lot of times, like, breaking the rules or doing things. I mean, some consultants we worked with later on down the road, they said that we disrupted the retail industry, right? But we didn't know that. We just didn't play by the rules because we didn't know what the rules were.
That's good.
And so have a luxury playing by the rules,
you just had to make it work. And so it was a different perspective on retail, but we didn't know it was a different perspective. It was just
you literally paved your future road in reality. Yeah. And
so then that would be my advice is, like, if you're going into a business, you don't know what you don't know. Do it your way, man. And you make it work.
Love that. Yeah, that's powerful, man. Transition a little bit. We always ask everybody about restaurants in Vegas, man. So that's one topic for us. So give us one gem of a restaurant that you like.
Dude, I got 2 minutes. You got to tell me, like, the genre. I mean, I'm like, I got a pizza spot for you. I got a steakhouse for you. I got my favorite sushi spot for you.
We don't get a lot of
whatever comes, like, it can be high end or hole in the wall, whatever you want. Yeah.
Pizza is good pie.
Yeah,
good pie.
Good pie. District. Good pie is
good
probably
pie is good.
Yeah, it's probably the GOAT pizza spot for me. Thai food, Lamai.
Oh, I do.
Lamai, Latai is good. Obviously, Lotus is Lotus, but Latai is a little bit.
Shout out to Lotus. We got Penny on, so we got to give her some love. Yeah, good stuff.
Lotus is great. Italian, I think Nora's, and then
we like that Manzu.
Manzu's Nora's son, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I'm so mad at myself. I've not been to Manzu. I keep hearing about Manzu. So Josh Molina mentioned that from Makers and Finders. Said I gotta check that out. So I got to check out Manzu.
1228 that just opened on Main Street is amazing. They make all their breads in house.
That sounds really good.
1228. Okay.
Yeah, so 1228 just opened recently. Okay. I think the gentleman that owns it was really high up in the Wolfgang Puck organization for a long time.
Okay.
And wanted to do something on his own. So I'm pretty sure Wolfgang is invested in the restaurant, but it's his concept fully.
Awesome.
But they make all artisanal breads. I mean, food's epic.
Okay.
I live close to downtown, so downtown's my stomping ground, which is great because there's a good resurgence of restaurants and things happening down there.
Awesome, man. You give us some gems, man. I'm gonna check that one out. I've heard all the other ones you went, but that one was excellent.
What a best burger spot for us would be. I mean, there's always Holstein's is good.
Holstein's was my favorite.
Holstein's is good.
Fuku.
Shout out to Colin. Colin we had on. Colin's great. Yeah.
Steak. I'm gonna go Barry's.
Barry's.
Those are our guys too. You talk about all our guys. Yeah, y'all seen Marco, Barry, we had them all.
Yeah.
I love them. Yeah, great people.
I ate there last night. Actually.
Did you? Okay, love them.
Barry's is really good.
Yeah.
As for the shrimp they had there, I got a shrimp there. It was like the
That's
biggest
how
shrimp I
people
ate in my entire life. I don't even know they made them that big.
Yeah, they
Like
got
this
great
big.
drinks, man. Barry's got great drinks too, man.
They got
So
great everything.
That's our go-to.
That butter
for sure.
cake at the end.
yeah,
The
it's
toffee,
dangerous.
butter
Dangerous. Well, good, man. What do you want to leave us out on? What else did we forget that we can leave us out on? That anything you want to share that we might have forgot you? Ask you. I know you said La Jolla's coming up, but anything else you want to leave us out on? Or when is La Jolla opening? Maybe I should ask that.
Slated for June 15th.
Oh, that's coming up quick.
Real quick.
Okay.
Real quick. And, you know, those things don't always pan out by the date, but
Yeah.
that's the plan.
That's the plan
That's
after
the plan.
the
It's June.
delays. So I think we might be safe on that one.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we already missed our launch date. I think
We need to target the
The
shoot for
summertime.
November of last year.
Yeah.
So.
Jeez. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I feel like there's probably a couple things that we've left off the table. I'm not sure that you have time. We might need another podcast.
Let's do it. We will do another podcast.
You know,
for sure.
we talk about our homegrown roots here that we didn't get to touch on, our partnerships that we're working on, NFL and hopefully Golden Knights.
Love that.
You know,
Okay.
things like that. Local collaboration. When we did a collaboration with Fuku Burger.
Oh, nice.
Colin, shout out to Colin. Yeah, great guy.
And trying to get more involved in the community.
Okay.
I think it's really important, you know, that, you know, we use this term, we should own this city, right? And we don't mean that in any kind of an arrogant, like, oh, we own this city. It's more like, this is our city, and we're part of it, you know? And we want, you know, not just for the name recognition or brand recognition, like, we want people to feel like Feature's home, you know, part of home when you think about Vegas. And so we have a lot of initiatives that we really want to, I guess, get into, or like
Roll
I said,
out.
yeah, because it's important, right?
Yep.
You know, I have so much love for, you know, I'm not a Raider fan, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a huge football fan, and the only reason I'm not a Raider fan is because I already have a team because I grew up here without a team, right?
I get it.
And so
I
my
get it.
allegiance is still there, but
I get it.
I am fully supportive of the Raiders. I'll be supportive of the A's, even though I'm a Yankee fan.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
But it's just the things that are happening to this city are just it's just becoming such a great city.
I agree.
And I want people to think about Feature in those terms as well. But from an authentic place, like, we want to be involved, not just, it's not lip service, like, you know, something good to put on your resume. It's like, this is our town, man, you know.
Man, I'm glad you said it. We're aligned on that setup. And I mean, I'll just tell you guys right off the bat, you got a home with us, because that's why Chris and I developed Vegas Circle and my wife, is because we wanted to give people like you guys the platform to share, but we want to get more involved in the community. That's what we're building a lot of these relationships.
Sure.
I mean, as you know, behind the scenes, you know how it is. You can just make a phone call, and there's 3 different people that you might be able to know and put on the call. So,
Sure.
But we do need to have you guys come back on and just kind of update us every. No, I'm serious. Have you guys update every year. You know what you guys been doing,
Sure.
because especially being locals, they need to be able to hear that. And we need to support each other, because that's how we win all together.
100%.
So, but I appreciate you guys. What's your social handles? I know the Feature handle.
Feature,
obviously.
at Feature.
Yeah. You guys want to share your personals? If you guys have personals,
I can give it to you, but I don't have any content on there.
Stay with Feature.
I don't even have one. It's just Feature.
Just Feature.
That's another question. How you get that handle? That's gonna be our next
You guys had that
podcast.
long, 2010, you had that for a long time.
It's a
No.
surprising
We had to,
story, but there are actually brokers that deal with websites, handles, all that stuff. So if you want it, you can get it. It just
just gotta
depends
pay.
on
How much you want to pay for
But
it.
as crazy as that is, you know, and this is kind of a wild story. I think when we reached out, we were featurelv.com, which
Okay.
for all intents and purposes is a big no-no. You should never have your city or anything in your web address, right? Like
Don't start him on this,
again, we
please,
didn't know what we didn't know, so we're like, fuck. So
Vegas Circle. Don't even start. Don't even start.
so when you think about Feature as
Yeah.
a name, it is the worst thing you can get, dude. It's like super ambiguous. It's a huge word. You Google it, all this shit comes up. Like there's, you know, like you're not getting that handle. So we were Feature LV for years, and I think we reached out at one point, and I wanted $250,000 or $500,000 for this site. And
sound like UFC when they bought UFC number.
our CMO Brian has actually been in the digital space for a long time. Like, dude's a gangster when it comes to digital, and he was like, well, I got a guy, dude. That's what he does. And I was like, wait, what do you mean that's what he does? And he's like, AJ, it's literally this guy's job will be to reach out to that guy because people just buy domains and they just broker the deal. And it's like, dude, it took like, 4 months. He's just whittling, just beating him up. You go cold. Like, it's a whole process.
Oh, wow.
But unbeknownst to us, like, there's people that just specialize in this shit. He happened to be like one of the best, but there's like, 10 or 12 guys. That's all they do. Guys or gals. That's all they do is they broker websites.
So many layers to life.
They broker the domains from the people that are selling them.
So many smart people. We found that out from one of our friends that we interviewed. We didn't even know it, but that space you 100%. They buy
it's
websites
crazy.
on the.
So the bottom line is, we paid for it. And the IG handle, we paid for that.
But not nearly.
But it was worth it.
Not nearly to ask.
Worth it, yeah.
It is if you're trying to build, long-term global brand, right? Like if McDonald's was McDonald's CA, you'd be like, what is this shit, right? Like from California, but it's McDonald's, so they're global, right?
Yeah, that's real. That's real. So with Chris, we had
that makes a lot of sense.
Well, we appreciate hanging out with y'all, man. You guys are
it's been
great, man. We support you guys and what you guys are doing. We'll continue to keep supporting you guys. So check us out at vegasstore.com and check these guys out and support them. So appreciate y'all's time, man.
Thank you
very much, man.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really good stuff.